Imagine a massive nuclear-powered aircraft carrier cuts through the Pacific waters near Pearl Harbor when suddenly, a mysterious electrical storm envelops the vessel. When the skies clear, the crew finds themselves in an impossible situation. It's December 6, 1941, one day before the Japanese attack that would forever change American history. This is the premise of The Final Countdown, a film that asks one of the most tantalizing what-if questions in cinema. What if modern military might could intervene at history's most pivotal moments? When The Final Countdown was released in 1980, America was still processing the aftermath of Vietnam and the ongoing Cold War tensions. The military film genre was entering a transition period, moving from the gritty realism of 1970s war films toward the more jingoistic military spectacles that would dominate the Reagan era. With its $8 million budget, the film would go on to earn approximately $16.6 million at the box office. Modest success for a film that accomplished something remarkable: securing permission to film aboard the actual USS Nimitz, one of America's most advanced aircraft carriers. What makes The Final Countdown so fascinating isn't just its high-concept premise or impressive naval aviation sequences, it's how the film serves as a unique intersection of military procedural, science fiction thought experiment, and historical fiction. While most time travel films focus on preventing catastrophes or exploring fish-out-of-water scenarios, The Final Countdown presents a more complex moral dilemma. When given the power to change history, should you? In this video, we'll explore how this cult classic managed to combine cutting-edge military technology with speculative fiction to create a uniquely compelling narrative that continues to provoke discussion over 40 years later. From its groundbreaking aircraft carrier filming to its deliberately ambiguous ending, The Final Countdown represents a fascinating moment in film history where entertainment, military cooperation, and philosophical questions about historical intervention collided on the big screen. The Final Countdown may not have had the budget of contemporary blockbusters like The Empire Strikes Back, but what it accomplished technically remains impressive even by today's standards. The film's greatest technical achievement was capturing authentic naval aviation footage that would have been impossible to fake. Director Don Taylor and his crew secured unprecedented access to film aboard the USS Nimitz, one of America's nuclear-powered supercarriers, capturing the daily operations of a vessel that few civilians would ever see up close. The aerial sequences featuring F-14 Tomcats, then America's cutting-edge fighter jets, remain some of the most authentic military aviation footage in cinema history. Unlike later films that would rely heavily on models or CGI, The Final Countdown features real Navy pilots performing actual maneuvers. The dogfight sequence where modern F-14s encounter Japanese Zeros replicas built for the film creates a visual contrast that effectively tells the story. Sleek gray supersonic jets circling wooden propeller planes highlights the time displacement more effectively than any dialogue could. Cinematographer Victor J. Kemper faced the unique challenge of filming in the cramped, industrial environment of an aircraft carrier while still creating visually compelling compositions. Notice how he uses the ship's angular architecture to frame shots, particularly in the CIC, Combat Information Center. Scenes where tension builds through tight close-ups of radar screens and concerned faces. The carrier itself becomes a character, with its massive flight deck operations filmed with a documentary-like attention to detail. The production faced significant logistical hurdles. The Navy provided access to the Nimitz for only limited periods, meaning scenes had to be meticulously planned and executed within strict timeframes. The film crew had to work around active military operations. Those aren't extras in the background. They're actual Navy personnel performing their duties. When you see aircraft launching and recovering on the carrier deck, you're watching real operations incorporated seamlessly into the narrative. Here's something most viewers don't know. the mysterious electrical storm that transports the Nimitz back in time, an effect that might seem quaint by modern standards, represented a significant practical effects challenge in 1980. The swirling vortex was created using a combination of cloud tank photography, where paint is diffused through water and filmed, theatrical lighting effects, and optical compositing. This old-school approach gives the phenomenon a strange, organic quality that feels more mysterious than many of today's more polished but sterile CGI effects. The film's visual language shifts subtly between time periods. Scenes set in 1980 feature cooler color temperatures and modern documentary-style camera work, while the 1941 sequences employ warmer tones and more traditional, stable framing, a visual cue that helps audiences track the temporal shifts without heavy-handed exposition. This attention to period-appropriate visual aesthetics extends to the costumes and set design of the 1941 characters and locations, creating a convincing historical backdrop against which the modern carrier seems even more anachronistic. The final countdown features a remarkable ensemble cast whose gravitas elevates what could have been merely a high-concept B-movie into something more compelling. Kirk Douglas, as Captain Matthew Yelland, brings his characteristic intensity and moral authority to the role. Douglas was no stranger to military roles, but here he creates a nuanced portrayal of command responsibility. Watch his performance during the war room debate about intervening in history. His facial expressions convey the weight of an impossible decision while maintaining the stoic demeanor expected of a naval commander. Martin Sheen, fresh off his career-defining role in Apocalypse Now, plays Warren Lasky, the civilian observer who serves as our entry point into the world of naval operations. Sheen's natural skepticism and intelligence make him the perfect audience surrogate as he questions the situation they find themselves in. The scene where Lasky first realizes they've traveled through time showcases Sheen's ability to convey dawning comprehension and disbelief without overplaying the moment. James Ferrantino delivers perhaps the film's most emotionally complex performance as Commander Richard Owens, who discovers his historical connection to the past. The scene where Owens recognizes Catherine Ross's character from a photograph in his own possession creates one of the film's most intriguing temporal paradoxes. Ferrantino masterfully balances military discipline with personal investment, particularly as he argues for intervention with increasing emotional intensity. Catherine Ross rounds out the main cast as Laurel Scott, a 1940s woman rescued by the time-displaced carrier. Ross, known for The Graduate and Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, brings a necessary human element to the historical stakes. Her confusion and gradual acceptance of her impossible situation grounds the science fiction premise in human terms. The film's most memorable sequence remains the encounter between modern F-14 Tomcats and Japanese Zeros. This scene brilliantly encapsulates the film's central premise. What happens when modern military technology confronts historical forces? The pilot's almost casual superiority, just like shooting ducks in a barrel, contrasts sharply with the life-or-death historical stakes, creating genuine tension despite the obvious technological mismatch. Another crucial moment comes when Captain Yelland must decide whether to intervene in the attack on Pearl Harbor. The scene plays out not as an action sequence, but as a moral debate, with officers arguing both the practical and philosophical implications of changing history. This conversation, taking place in the technically advanced CIC surrounded by modern military hardware, highlights the central theme. With great power comes impossible choices. These performances connect directly to the film's exploration of duty versus moral imperative. Each character represents a different perspective. Yelland embodies military duty and chain of command. Lasky represents analytical skepticism. Owens advocates for humanitarian intervention regardless of historical consequences. Their competing viewpoints transform what could have been a straightforward military adventure into a thoughtful examination of responsibility, historical determinism, and the ethics of intervention. Interestingly, the primary roles were originally offered to different actors. Sean Connery was approached for Captain Yelland and John Travolta for a fighter pilot role that was eventually reduced. The naval technical advisors played a crucial role, not just in ensuring military accuracy, but in coaching the actors on proper naval bearing and terminology. The authenticity in the performances, from main cast to background sailors, creates an immersive military environment that makes the fantastic premise more believable. When The Final Countdown hit theaters in 1980, critical reception was decidedly mixed. Many reviewers acknowledged the impressive aircraft carrier footage and intriguing premise, but criticized what they saw as a failure to fully capitalize on its provocative what-if scenario. Roger Ebert gave the film 2.5 stars, writing that it begins with a fantastic premise, proceeds to explore its implications, and then stops, dead in the water, without having really done very much. The New York Times similarly complained that the film raises provocative questions and then runs away from their implications. The most controversial aspect of the film remains its ending, where the Nimitz is pulled back to the present before it can intervene in the attack on Pearl Harbor. What some critics saw as an anticlimactic cop-out has over time been reappraised as a more philosophical conclusion. The film refuses to indulge in simplistic military fantasy, instead suggesting that perhaps history is immutable, or that the moral complexity of altering the past is too great to resolve with easy answers. This deliberate ambiguity, initially frustrating to audience expectations, has contributed to the film's lasting discussion value. Public perception of The Final Countdown has evolved dramatically over the decades. What was initially dismissed as a missed opportunity has gained appreciation as a thoughtful military science fiction film. The advent of home video allowed viewers to appreciate its more subtle aspects, particularly its detailed portrayal of naval operations. Military personnel especially have championed the film for its authentic depiction of carrier life and operations, a rarity in Hollywood productions. The film's reputation has been further enhanced by naval enthusiasts who recognize it as containing some of the best footage ever captured of F-14 Tomcats in action. With the Tomcat now retired from service, The Final Countdown serves as a historical document of this iconic aircraft at the height of its operational capability. What was once simply contemporary military hardware has now become a nostalgic glimpse into a specific moment in naval aviation history. Eagle-eyed viewers have noted numerous hidden details that reward repeat viewing. Watch closely, and you'll notice that Commander Owens seems strangely familiar with the history of the 1941 characters, subtly hinting at his personal connection to these events even before it's revealed. The film also contains several authentic naval procedures and terminology that would be familiar to service members, but fly under the radar for civilian viewers, creating an additional layer of authenticity. Another fascinating aspect is how the film handles its time travel mechanics. Unlike many sci-fi films that bog down in explaining their pseudoscience, The Final Countdown presents its temporal anomaly as simply an unexplained phenomenon. This approach, initially criticized as underdeveloped, now feels refreshingly straightforward compared to more convoluted time travel narratives. The film trusts its audience to accept the premise and focus instead on the human and ethical questions it raises. Perhaps most interestingly, political interpretations of the film have shifted with the times. What in 1980 might have been seen as a straightforward military power fantasy, modern forces defeating historical enemies, now reads more as a complex exploration of America's relationship with its military history and questions about the ethics of intervention. As America's role on the world stage has evolved through subsequent decades, the film's central question, just because we can intervene, should we, has taken on new resonance. The Final Countdown has left a distinct mark on both military and science fiction cinema. Its influence can be seen in later works that explore temporal displacement in military contexts, from episodes of Star Trek to films like Stargate. More directly, Its premise has been revisited in novels like John Birmingham's Axis of Time series and Taylor Anderson's Destroyermen books, which expand on the concept of modern military forces displaced to historical settings. The film pioneered a specific subgenre of alternate history narratives focused on military technology creating historical divergences. What makes The Final Countdown particularly relevant today is how it addresses questions of military power and historical responsibility that continue to resonate. In an era where technological superiority in warfare has become even more pronounced, the film's central question, does superior capability create moral obligation, feels increasingly pertinent. Modern military interventions continue to grapple with the same ethical questions that Captain Yelland and his crew face. When is intervention justified, and who bears responsibility for the consequences of action or inaction? The film's commitment to military authenticity has earned it a special place in naval culture. It's reportedly still screened aboard carriers and at naval bases, appreciated for being one of the few Hollywood productions to accurately capture the complexity and scale of carrier operations. For many naval aviators and sailors, The Final Countdown represents a rare moment when Hollywood got the details right, presenting their profession with respect rather than as mere background for action sequences. From a filmmaking perspective, The Final Countdown stands as a testament to the value of practical effects and real locations. In an age of CGI naval battles and digital environments, the authenticity of filming on an actual Nimitz-class carrier gives the film a documentary quality that remains impressive. Modern military films often struggle to balance spectacle with realism, something The Final Countdown achieved through necessity and access rather than technological manipulation. The film's deliberately ambiguous ending, once considered its weakness, now appears prescient in its resistance to simple resolution. By refusing to show an altered timeline or definitive intervention, the film avoids both military triumphalism and simplistic moral lessons. Instead, it leaves viewers with questions rather than answers, encouraging ongoing discussion about historical determinism, free will, and responsibility, themes that continue to engage audiences in our increasingly complex geopolitical landscape. The Final Countdown isn't just a curiosity from the early 1980s or merely a showcase of impressive carrier operations. It represents a unique moment when the U.S. military, Hollywood storytelling, and philosophical speculation about time and history converge to create something more thought-provoking than its modest box office performance might suggest. As we continue to face moments where technology and military capability outpace our ethical frameworks for their use, The Final Countdown reminds us that the hardest questions aren't about what we can do, but what we should do. In that sense, this cult classic from 1980 isn't just about a journey to the past, it's about issues we're still navigating in the present and will likely continue to face in the future.